All right, good morning, everyone. 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and daylight savings time. So, welcome to the board meeting. If anyone's a little punchy like I am, we will be understandable of one another. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all to the Placer County Board of Supervisors special meeting, Monday, March 9th, 2020. Look at that, we're no longer in 2019. This one says 2020. I think it got changed on the other one. So we are going to go ahead and start with a flag salute led by our CEO.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, before we get started with the main event, we are going to first hear from our Health and Human Services Department about the coronavirus. So, Dr. Sisson, if you would, go forward.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisors, for the opportunity to update you this morning on the public health emergency due to the novel coronavirus. I'm Dr. Amy Sisson, Placer County Health Officer, as well as Public Health Director. Forgive me, it's been a long week with not enough sleep, so like Madam Chair, I'm also a little bit punchy. So I'm going to read a statement because I want this to be clear and concise. In late 2019, an outbreak of respiratory disease caused by a new coronavirus was detected in Wuhan, China. The novel coronavirus has been named SARS-CoV-2, and the disease it causes has been named Coronavirus Disease 2019, or COVID-19. Coronaviruses are a large family of viruses, some of which cause respiratory illness in humans. Symptoms in an infected person may include fever, cough, and shortness of breath. As of March 8th, over 110,000 cases of the disease have been detected in 108 countries, including 554 cases in the United States. Worldwide, over 3,800 people have died from COVID-19, including 21 in the United States. Because SARS-CoV-2 is a new virus, we're still learning about how it is spread and the disease it causes. Early studies suggest that the virus is primarily transmitted through respiratory droplets produced when someone coughs or sneezes. The incubation period of the virus is between 2 and 14 days. The severity of illness ranges from mild to severe, including illness resulting in death. On January 30th, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. On January 31st, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services declared a national public health emergency. Placer County announced its first case of COVID-19 on March 2nd in a healthcare worker who was exposed in Solano County. On March 3rd, Placer County announced its second case of COVID-19 in a resident who became ill during a cruise to the Mexican Riviera on the Grand Princess cruise ship. On March 4th, the second case of COVID-19 passed away from their illness, marking a tragic milestone in the disease outbreak as the first death from COVID-19 in California. Since then, we have identified 5 more cases in Placer County, all in passengers who traveled on the Grand Princess cruise ship between February 11th through the 21st. A total of 7 cases have been confirmed in Placer County to date. An additional 14 Placer County residents are suspected of having COVID-19 and are being tested. As of March 8th, there are 114 laboratory-confirmed cases of COVID-19 in California, including at least 14 community-acquired cases. Cases who are not sure how or where they became infected are community-acquired cases, and this means that the virus is spreading in the community. Community-acquired cases have been identified in several California counties, including Yolo and Sacramento counties. While Placer County does not yet have a confirmed community-acquired case, given the 17 days that have now elapsed since the return of passengers from the Grand Princess and the large number of persons in the local community who may have been exposed to identified cases as they went about their daily lives while ill, makes it virtually guaranteed that COVID-19 is spreading in the Placer community. Community spread indicates that we are entering a new phase of the epidemic. Up until now, the efforts of the Placer County Public Health Team have been focused on identifying persons with COVID-19, separating them from others, and tracking down persons who were exposed to the infected cases. This containment strategy has helped to slow the introduction of the virus that causes COVID-19 into our community, allowing time for us to prepare. But it is no longer effective given the large number of cases in the county and the broader region. Public health must now shift its measures or its efforts to what are called community mitigation strategies. Community mitigation measures or strategies are approaches that will slow the spread of COVID-19 in our community, reduce the number of people infected, and protect those who are most vulnerable to severe illness. By slowing spread, these mitigation measures will allow time for the healthcare system to prepare additional resources, as well as for production of a vaccine. The decision to shift from containment to community mitigation measures is being made after much deliberation and by weighing the potential benefits to the health of our community against the significant disruptive effects that these recommendations could have. I understand that these recommendations will have major impacts on the lives of people in our community. I am making these recommendations based on the best information I have at this time in order to protect the public's health. At this critical moment in the growing outbreak of COVID-19 in Placer County and the greater Sacramento region, decisive action is needed to slow the spread of the disease. Other California communities have already transitioned to community mitigation measures, including Santa Clara County, the City and County of San Francisco, and San Mateo County. I have been in close communication with my fellow health officers in Sacramento and Yolo counties to develop a regional mitigation strategy. Given the porous nature of county boundaries, with people crossing county lines regularly for work and other activities, a consistent regional approach is needed to be maximally effective in slowing the spread of COVID-19. We are developing joint recommendations, the details of which are still under development. The initial recommendations will impact workplaces, schools, large gatherings, and healthcare workers, including first responders, and would be in effect through March 31st. Additional strategies may be layered on as needed to slow the spread of COVID-19. For workplaces, I recommend that workplaces and businesses should implement telecommuting for their employees if this is feasible, and minimize the number of employees working within arm's length of each other. For large gatherings, I recommend that those who are planning large gatherings should consider postponing them or canceling them, especially if large numbers of people will be within arm's length of each other. For schools, I recommend that schools that have a COVID-19 exposure or case should make decisions about closing or other actions in collaboration with myself as the local health officer. Schools should also follow the joint guidance issued on March 7th by the California Departments of Public Health and Education, as well as to minimize students and/or staff working within arm's length of each other whenever feasible. I urge all sick persons to stay home if they are sick until they've had no fever, cough, or other respiratory symptoms for at least 72 hours after their symptoms resolve, or 7 days after their symptoms begin, whichever is longer. People with mild cold-like symptoms should manage their symptoms at home with over-the-counter drugs whenever possible, regardless of whether they have a cold, the flu, or COVID-19. People who develop difficulty breathing, feel lethargic, or are feeling better but then feel much worse should call their healthcare provider. If they need to go to the provider's office or urgent care center, they should call ahead so that the healthcare provider can be prepared to take care of them. People should only call 911 or go to an emergency department if they believe that their life is in imminent danger. Other emergencies are still occurring, and emergency resources must be available to address all of them, not just COVID-19. As I previously recommended, older persons and those with underlying medical conditions are at increased risk for severe COVID-19 disease and should consider staying home and away from social gatherings where people are within arm's length of each other. With the shift from containment to mitigation, it will no longer be necessary for someone who has been in contact with a case of COVID-19 to quarantine for 14 days. This applies to the general public, as well as healthcare workers and first responders. However, persons with a known exposure to COVID-19 should monitor themselves for respiratory symptoms and fever for 14 days. If they develop symptoms, they should stay home in order to protect those who are well. Testing for COVID-19 is now available through commercial laboratories in addition to public health laboratories. However, just because a test is available does not mean that it is necessary for most people. People who have mild symptoms or are getting better do not need to be tested because their treatment will be the same regardless of the test result. There is no approved medication to treat COVID-19. Testing is a decision made by healthcare providers to help in the care of very ill patients, as well as to protect public health. In addition to these new recommendations, I continue to recommend frequent hand washing, coughing and sneezing into a tissue or your sleeve instead of your hand, and cleaning surfaces more often. Because of the increasing impact of COVID-19 on Placer County, last week I declared a local health emergency in Placer County due to novel coronavirus. In addition to providing this update this morning, I come before you to request that you ratify this declaration of a local health emergency to allow for mutual aid from our state and local partners. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Holly Powers, the Assistant Director of the Office of Emergency Services here in Placer County, to discuss the proclamation of a local emergency. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have after she finishes her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sisson. Again, Holly Powers, your Assistant Director of Emergency Services here at Placer County. I'd like to start with just kind of recapping where we've been over the last week as far as the Office of Emergency Services is concerned. On Thursday, March 3rd, Mr. Leopold, under his authority as the Director of Emergency Services here in Placer County, proclaimed a local emergency in conjunction with our health officer to provide for the support necessary from the county, as well as any support that may become available from the state or federal governments in our response to the COVID-19 situation. As I did notify the board and county executive office, the governor proclaimed a state of emergency on March 4th, the day after, authorizing state agency support across the state. However, assistance to local governments has to be demonstrated, has to consist of the local government demonstrating extraordinary and disproportionate impacts due to the COVID-19 impact. The County Office of Emergency Services and our Activated Emergency Operations Center are actively working with the state to decipher what that means so that we can make sure we are included as available at the state level. On Friday, March 6th, we fully activated the County Emergency Operations Center under a unified command with our Health and Human Services Department, the Office of Emergency Services, Placer County Sheriff's Office, and CAL FIRE, Placer County Fire, in order to provide the best support possible to our public health partners and division as they work through this extremely complicated and ever-expanding event. The sole purpose of the Emergency Operations Center activation is to make sure we are providing whatever logistical support so that our public health subject matter experts can focus on just that, the health of the public and our first responders. I'm going to try and keep it short with that. I would like to mention that there has been a change in the resolutions to signify the importance of this being a special meeting and not a regular meeting. The board has been handed the updated resolutions, and it has been provided to the public as well. That is the end of my presentation, so I think at this point we'd open to questions.
Great, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it. Any questions from board members? Go ahead, Cindy. Sorry.
Thanks. First off, thank you all, and thanks to all our first responders and public health. And Amy did a great job on NPR the other morning. It was a great interview. I know how hard those are anyway in these situations. You've recommended postponing or canceling large gatherings, and I know there's an upcoming event up in Squaw Valley that and I don't know the status. I didn't hear about it over the weekend. Do you know if that's continuing or if they're postponing or canceling?
We haven't had any discussions with the organizers of that event.
Okay.
So I can't tell you. We, again, are just announcing this transition today.
Today.
So I think if we haven't heard from them, we probably will be.
I know that they were contacting me last week, and at that point in time, we weren't at that situation yet. But
Yeah, unfortunately, we are there now. So
Okay.
we can have that discussion with them.
okay. Thank you.
Preliminarily, the number that we're using for large gatherings is 50 persons or more.
Almost this room.
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, we should be arm's length apart in this room if possible.
I was going to tell everybody to move a chair. But I do appreciate that, and I'll have them be in touch with you. I think we need to get a handle on that
Thank
right
you.
away.
All right, seeing no other questions or comments from the board, I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone want to make a comment from the public about this item? All right, in regards to the item in front of us, yes, sir, you're welcome to come up.
My name is Brian Carlisle. There's been various clinical trials going on in China, as I'm sure you're aware. The only treatment that has shown any potential efficacy is this chloroquine pH, which in NIH documents as well as PubMed documents coming out of China has gone through a 100-person clinical trial now in China over the last few days. China is ramping up 2 million doses of that. This is a well-tolerated, well-understood medicine that was used for malaria, developed back in the 40s by Bayer. Have you evaluated that and made any recommendations, or are you looking into that as a possible treatment or looking into sourcing or recommending supply of that for our local medical community?
Right.
So before she answers that question, I'm going to see if there's any other public comment. All right, and then we'll close public comment, and then if you want to go ahead and answer the questions and do any follow-up.
Okay. So regarding chloroquine, I have heard that chloroquine has shown some promise initially. There's also an additional drug, remdesivir, an antiviral, which has shown promise against other coronaviruses, which is currently undergoing a clinical trial conducted by the NIH. And we actually have put our community providers in touch with with Gilead, who is the manufacturer of that pharmaceutical, so that if we have patients who are deteriorating, we could get them enrolled in that clinical trial so that they could receive remdesivir. I haven't heard of larger scale activity in terms of ramping up chloroquine, so that's something that we can explore. I think here at the local level, that's, I would be looking to the California Department of Public Health and the CDC to provide that guidance. We don't, at this point, have a large enough sample of patients, thankfully, that we would be able to see if that's effective or not. But they're looking at the larger population and could let us know if chloroquine is something that has indeed shown promise and that we should be then increasing our supplies of.
Great. Well, thank you, and I know that you are working very hard to make sure that you stay abreast so that you can communicate with the public what's happening. And I'm sorry, we've closed public comment. So I think what we have been asked now at this point is to adopt a declaration. And so if we don't have any other comments by the board, I'll consider a motion.
Move adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, so a motion by Holmes and a second by Wygant. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions. All right, so the motion passes. Anything else we need to do on that? All right, thank you very much for the update. My encouragement to folks is to maintain healthy habits, wash hands. If you're sick, stay home. We don't need to live in fear, but we need to be cautious and take care of our health as well as the health of others. So thank you very much for the update, ladies. Appreciate your hard work.
Thank you all.
Okay, we as they move out, there are some other seats. So for those who are looking for some seats, there are some up front if people want to have a seat and not stand during the hearing. We're going to move on to the Community Development Resource Agency, the Auburn Trap Shooting Club shot screen, and the appeal of the zoning administrator's revocation of a variance.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, E.J. Ivaldi with the Planning Services Division. This item before you today is an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to revoke a height variance that allowed a shot screen to be constructed at the Auburn Trap Club. The appellant is the Auburn Trap Club. Joining me here today is Patrick Dobbs with the Planning Services Division, who will be presenting this item.
Morning, Madam Chair, Supervisors. Patrick Dobbs, Planning Services. I'll be presenting the Auburn Trap Shooting Club shot screen variance revocation. The applicant has appealed the decision of the zoning administrator to revoke the height variance. We're requesting that you conduct the public hearing and deny the appeal filed by the Auburn Trap Shooting Club and uphold the zoning administrator's decision to revoke approval of the height variance that allowed the Auburn Trap Shooting Club to construct a noise-reducing sound curtain beyond the maximum zone district height of 36 feet to a maximum height of 68 feet in order the removal of the non-conforming portion of the wall within 90 days. The Trap Club is an outdoor shotgun range facility located at 11540 Lawrenson Road. It's about 5 miles north of here on the west side of Highway 49 in North Auburn. The property is 25 acres. About half the site is vegetated with native oak and pine trees and half grassland. There is a seasonal drainage that runs east-west through the middle of the property. Trap Club has continuously operated at the site since 1949. The property is located within the county's Auburn-Bowman Community Plan and is zoned farm. As I mentioned earlier, the farm district allows a maximum height of 36 feet for structures. Surrounding properties are also zoned farm and primarily developed with low-density single-family residences. On June 20th, 2018, the Trap Club submitted an application for a height variance to construct a sound curtain or shot screen with a maximum height of 68 feet and 650 feet in length to reduce downrange gunfire noise. The variance application included an acoustic analysis based on monitoring and modeling of trap clubs in Oakdale, California and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania that have sound curtains installed to determine the anticipated downrange sound attenuation and whether there was potential to increase noise in any direction through reflections or other effects. We requested that a third party, independent third party, do a peer review of the applicant's acoustic analysis that was conducted by Ballard Acoustical. Ballard agreed that there would be a noticeable decrease in sound levels downrange, and importantly, reflected sound would not intensify in any direction due to the sound absorbing properties of the screen material and the design features of the shot screen itself. The application did include an environmental questionnaire. Staff completed an initial study, negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines. That negative declaration relied on the acoustic analysis in determining that all environmental impacts from the project would be less than significant. On October 18th, 2018, the project was presented to the zoning administrator at a public hearing. Prior to the hearing, we did receive a comment letter from an immediate uprange neighbor, Pamela Massey. She expressed concerns that noise could be transferred directly to her property and did not want to negatively impact or affect her livelihood or that of her neighbors to benefit others. No one spoke in opposition at the hearing. The zoning administrator did approve the height variance and in doing so adopted the project's negative declaration. Recognized that there were unique circumstances and that the shot screen would substantially improve compatibility between the Trap Club and surrounding properties. That there would be no increase in noise in any direction or result in negative effects, and therefore there would not be detrimental to public welfare nor injurious to nearby properties. Zoning administrator recognized that there was potential for co-benefits in the shot screen regarding shot collection for recycling as well as reduced off-site lighting coming from the Trap Club's downrange floodlights, and determined that the height was the minimum necessary deviation from the development standards to achieve the project objectives. Following the approval, there was a 10-day appeal window. The project was not appealed. Construction of the shot screen commenced the following month in November of 2018. The structure is supported by 14 poles ranging in height from 42 feet to 68 feet. They're supported by 8-foot deep concrete piers and supported by guy wires. In the lower left-hand slide there, you see a picture of a level attached to one of the poles. The poles are angled 3 degrees from vertical. This is an attempt to direct reflected sound upward and away from surrounding properties. The panels were attached and the shot screen was completed in February of 2019. The wall is about 250 feet north of the shooting positions. It is laid out into 13 50-foot wide sections, 7 of which run parallel to the shooters. The outer 6 sections are angled inward. Following installation of the shot screen, staff immediately received numerous public complaints. These were primarily focused on noise reflections, but also expressed some dissatisfaction with the color and visibility of the screen, as well as light reflecting off the screen. We scheduled a meeting with the applicant immediately and discussed the volume of complaints and the range of issues being raised. The applicant hired a noise consultant, Extant Acoustical, and Extant performed systematic noise monitoring at a number of locations around the club while shooting was occurring. And the post-construction noise monitoring documented that properties to the south were experiencing increased noise levels. So the applicant and their noise consultant explored 3 possible solutions to mitigate the areas experiencing increased sound levels. Those solutions include, number 1, straightening those end sections of the screen. Number 2, removing the lower 10 to 20 feet of barrier material panels. And number 3, increasing the angle of the shot screen to 50 degrees to direct, again, reflected sound upward and away from surrounding properties, this so-called shot funnel concept. Let's see. Using a computer model, their consultant evaluated the effectiveness of the potential solutions, and while some modifications showed promise to mitigate areas experiencing increased sound levels, the Extant report discloses that it's important to understand the limitations of modeling and the potential for other extraneous factors to affect the end result. And the Extant report further confirms the uncertain outcome of the possible solutions evaluated and states that the potential for energy to be redirected back down to the surrounding community remains relevant and unknown. The county continued to receive complaints, and staff again met with the applicant in March, May, and August of last year to discuss solutions. These include operational changes, such as days of the week and time of operation, as well as physical modifications to the shot screen. Staff also met with concerned neighbors in May and August of last year, and after which the county hired our own noise consultant, Saxelby Acoustics, to peer review the applicant's noise consultant report. Saxelby affirmed that increased noise was a result of acoustic energy reflection and that residents to the south were now hearing 2 peak sounds from each shot. We asked them to evaluate the potential health effects, and based on published Environmental Protection Agency reports, although there are areas experiencing increased noise levels, this noise does not pose a risk to public health. So post-construction noise monitoring confirms that the noise reflection is inconsistent with the acoustic analysis provided in the application and the environmental analysis relied on for the variance approval. Section 1762-170 of the zoning ordinance lays out the county's revocation procedures. The county may revoke any land use permit if it is determined that and established that the permit was obtained through misrepresentation, that it violates or fails to comply with county code or permits conditions of approval, or that it violates local, state, or federal laws which affects the health, safety, peace, morals, or general welfare of the public. This section lays out the noticing requirements and revocation hearing procedures, which we have followed. It provides 3 options should a decision be made to revoke the permit. Those include providing additional time to the applicant to correct the noncompliance, modifying conditions of approval in the permit, or if a decision is made to revoke the permit, ordering the removal of the non-conforming portion of the structure within a specified time frame. This section identifies who can appeal the revocation and the limitations of the use of the property following revocation. Based on the project record, it's staff's determination that Auburn Trap Club has had sufficient opportunity to bring the sound curtain into compliance. There's nothing that's preventing the Trap Club from submitting an application to modify the shot screen. Quoting conclusions from Saxelby Acoustics report, for any potential modifications to the screen, it's unlikely that any fix would have satisfactory results at all locations which are experiencing sound reflections. It's unlikely to achieve the same sound levels that were experienced prior to the wall installation, and removal of the barrier is the only practical solution to eliminate the noise or reflected noise issues caused by the barrier. With no reliable solutions to resolve the sound issues, on December 19th, 2019, staff brought the previously approved height variance back to the zoning administrator and recommended the project be revoked, or the height variance be revoked. Following staff's presentation, Chris Lane, the former Trap Club president, and Brian Carlisle, the downrange project sponsor, presented on behalf of the Auburn Trap Club. In their presentation, they discussed a number of issues, including increased use and frequency of the club, particularly by high school shooting clubs. They discussed the percussive health and noise effects and atmospheric condition effects on noise. They do want to fix the sound issues by increasing the wall angle. They say their modeling is accurate and that it's going to work this time. But at the same time, they want to establish a noise metric that can be measured and determined to, as far as whether any modifications are successful or a failure. If they brought up the fact that if the permit is revoked, they're back in the same situation as they were before with their downrange neighbors. They discussed whose responsibility it would be to fund the demolition. There were some questions from the zoning administrator, from Mr. Carlisle. At the hearing, it was revealed that the screen material that was installed is different than what was analyzed. And so these sound issues are not disputed. Trap Club in their presentation recognized that there are reflections and they are a problem. Let's see. There were approximately 32 members of the public that provided testimony at the revocation hearing. The community was divided, with about half supporting denying the appeal and allowing the Trap Club to mitigate the sound issues, and the other half supporting revocation and removal of the non-conforming portion of the wall. Testimony that supported denial of the revocation and to allow the Trap Club to modify the shot screen in an attempt to mitigate the noise problems asked that the zoning administrator consider the time and expense the applicant had invested to find a viable solution, the numerous public benefits that the Trap Club provides, particularly these youth shooting programs, discuss the lack of availability of other shooting clubs in the area, and the effectiveness of the shot screen's downrange noise reduction and the consequences of reverting the sound effects back onto the downrange properties if the wall were removed. Comments that supported revocation of the variance raised issues regarding negative impacts to quality of life and health effects to people and animals. Some have been advised that upon change of ownership, they need to disclose through real estate documents that they live in proximity with a gun club. They expressed concerns about the length of time needed to fix the noise reflection and indicated that gunfire noise wasn't a problem before the shot screen was erected, and that the issue is not the wall, or the issue is the wall, not the Trap Club. Regardless of opposition or support for the revocation, there was a public recognition of the longstanding use of the property for the Trap Club and general support of the club, yet a strong expressed desire by many to reduce the level of percussive noise caused by gunfire. After closing the revocation hearing, the zoning administrator decided to take the matter under advisement and deliberate on the evidence before issuing a determination. On January 2nd this year, the zoning administrator decision was issued to rescind approval of the height variance. In his decision to revoke the variance, the zoning administrator determined that the screen material that was installed was less sound absorbing than originally analyzed, and that contributed in part to this reflected sound. Furthermore, he determined that the project failed to comply with Code Section 1760-100D1, which are the findings necessary to approve a variance, and cited that the project failed to comply with the permit's condition of approval number 1 for the variance. The Trop Club submitted their appeal on January 8th. They submitted supplemental arguments on February 7th. And in their letter of appeal, they raised 7 points, that the project was predicated on decisions and work performed by others, individuals, that factors leading to the shot screen sound redirection include the planning services direction to move the screen closer to the shooters, that the ruling refused the Trap Club the opportunity to potentially rectify the noise issues, that the extant acoustical analysis and report is more thorough and detailed than Saxelby Acoustics' conclusions, which they say are incomplete, that the decision to revoke the variance only considers uprange neighbors and does not consider other affected stakeholders like these youth shooting programs or downrange neighbors or the Trap Club itself. They discussed that if nuisance abatement proceedings were to occur, that it could likely shut down the club activities until the wall is removed. They're a nonprofit. They are unsure whether they can fund the demolition. And if the wall is removed and the previous conditions are restored, they still have the same situation with downrange neighbors, and some have indicated that they might file a lawsuit for additional noise attenuation. In addition, or in an effort to address these community concerns, in their letter of appeal, the Trap Club did indicate that they have voluntarily stopped shooting on Wednesdays and Fridays to address these concerns. This revocation appeal is exempt from CEQA. The project was properly noticed. We did receive a number of additional comments after the packet went out. You've been provided copies of all of those. Supervisors, these are the facts. The county relied on information for the project's environmental analysis and subsequent findings and approval. This information turned out to be incorrect. Elements of the shot screen did not perform as expected. It didn't work as it was supposed to. And construction of the shot screen resulted in measurable negative noise impacts to upper range property owners to the south. In his capacity as the hearings officer for this revocation, your Community Development Resource Agency Director, Steve Pedretti, issued a decision that the height variance shall be revoked. Accordingly, staff is forwarding his decision and recommending that the Board of Supervisors deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's decision to revoke the height variance that allowed the Auburn Trap Shooting Club to construct a noise-reducing sound curtain beyond the zone district maximum height of 36 feet to a maximum height of 68 feet. In order the removal of the non-conforming portion of the wall within 90 days of the effective date of the revocation, based on the findings and supported by the conditions for permit revocation stated in the staff report. That concludes our presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can answer your questions.
Thank you. Any questions before we get to the appellant from any of the members of the board? Supervisor Holmes?
Patrick, thank you for your detailed report. On slide 16 regarding the planning department had the shot screen moved closer to the shooters. That was done for environmental reasons, is that correct?
Yes.
Let
Let me just get here. Oh boy, got a little turned around here. Sorry. Where am
I think it was 16.
Okay, thank you. So you asked about the planning division's direction to move the screen closer, and I wouldn't characterize it as that. We originally saw kind of a conceptual design, and in that design, the shot screen bifurcated this seasonal drainage.
Okay.
And we simply pointed out to the applicants that there was evidence, of wetland type vegetation and such, and that that design should require consultation with California Fish and Wildlife. And in their haste to move forward with the project, the actual application design that we received, it had been moved in front of that seasonal drainage. So it wasn't our direction per se, but we at least notified them of other affected parties that would have to be involved should they go with that original design.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Gustafson?
Patrick, also thank you for the detailed work on this. If we were to uphold the revocation, the wall could remain at 36 feet,
That's correct.
and then we would have to look at an analysis of if the sound is still an issue for the neighbors?
Again,
Because my understanding is the wall, the lower part of the wall may reflect that same sound back into the,
yes, thank you for the
Uprange.
question. Again, the zone district allows a maximum height of 36 feet. So the reasoning is that should they have just come in for a 36-foot wall, they would have been able to do so just ministerially with a building permit, no discretion. As a ministerial project, I do not think it's subject to additional environmental review, even if it were to remain at 36 feet.
so no matter what the sound would be.
That's my understanding.
All right, looks like there are no other questions from board members. So just for folks to know, what we will do is we will have a presentation by the appellant and then any county response to the appellant, any questions that are brought up, and then we will open it up to public comment after that. So with that, a representative from the Auburn Trap Club is welcome to come on up.
Getting used to some new glasses, so forgive me. Madam Chair and honorable supervisors, my name is Jay Rich. I am the current president of the Auburn Trap Shooting Club. Thank you for your time today to hear the club's appeal. I know a lot of what will be said here today has been previously covered. We understand that the Board of Supervisors are very aware of the thoughts and feelings of all parties involved regarding the shot screen at the club. You have heard many arguments pro and con concerning the same. The club appreciates all those who have continued to support the club, especially those negatively affected by the shot screen. We can never thank all those who have supported us through this circumstance enough. We know that emotions are high on all sides, and we understand the negative impact of the shot screen and how it has affected our neighbors. We are sympathetic to all those who have been adversely affected, and our goal is to rectify the situation so that all parties are satisfied. In order to accomplish that goal, the club is asking the Board of Supervisors to allow it to modify the shot screen to alleviate the backscatter noise affecting the uprange neighbors south of the club. Additionally, the club is willing to modify its schedule for shooting operations regarding days and hours of shooting. To that end, we are attempting to reach an agreement with certain downrange neighbors south of or north of the club who would be particularly affected if the shot screen is required to come down. Accordingly, we ask the Board of Supervisors to reconsider the zoning administrator's decision and allow the mitigation of the shot screen. If that is the case, the club hopes to reach an agreement with Mr. Brian Carlisle and Coastal Netting to perform the necessary modification measures to divert the backscatter upwards, thus alleviating the noise to uprange neighbors. The club does not have the financial wherewithal to take on that expense alone to implement that mitigation measures outlined in the study completed by Mr. Mike Carr. Accordingly, provided that the club is unable to achieve an agreement to perform Mr. Carr's proposed modifications, or if the mitigation measures fail, the shot screen would be removed, thus putting the club back in the same position it found itself in 3 years ago. As for the appeal, the club is appealing the January 2020 ruling by the county zoning administrator granting the county's planning staff's recommendation to revoke the club's shot screen variance permit and requiring the club to remove the non-conforming portions of the shot screen within 90 days. Our appeal is based on the county not affording the club certain procedural and substantive due process, thus leaving the club in an untenable position to comply with the zoning administrator's problematic ruling. Specifically, there is a lack of evidence in the administrative record to support the decision that the independent acoustic consultant, Mike Carr's proposed modifications to the shot screen would not be effective and address the complaints about the backscatter noise by uprange residents. In making his decision, the zoning administrator relied on the county's consultant, Mr. Luke Saxby, who indicated that it was his opinion that the proposed sound mitigation measures would not be effective to address uprange residents' complaints. In forming his opinion, Mr. Saxby provided no expert analysis or basis for his expert opinions and were in contrary to Mr. Carr's analysis. Mr. Carr, a very experienced sound engineer, constructed a detailed 3D acoustic model of the current shot screen and surrounding topography. Accurate to an elevation of 1 foot using a robust 3D acoustic modeling program. This model was validated with extensive field data based on controlled shooting at the club to an accuracy of 1 decibel. Various reflection mitigation approaches were analyzed, and successful modification to the shot screen involving sloping the screen to a 50-degree angle to the shooters was demonstrated to reduce the reflections to a level well below the historical backscatter noise from the shooting. A video was presented at the variance permit revocation hearing that is included in our materials for this appeal of a trap range in Italy demonstrating that slope back stop resulted in 0 reflective noise. Mr. Carr's analysis took weeks to complete in great detail and was presented to the county planning in May, June, and August of 2019. In turn, the planning hired Mr. Saxelby to review the proposed mitigation. Mr. Saxelby met with Mr. Carr for a couple of hours and wrote a 3-page summary report agreeing that the slope shot screen would be effective, but he also listed a number of caveats suggesting that under various hypothetical conditions, there may be some still reflected noise. Mr. Saxelby did not present any data, any analysis supportive of his caveats and suppositions. The club and the downrange residents, Mr. Carlisle, who financed most of the shot screen and handled the permitting with the county, met with the county personnel in August of 2019 and presented a detailed refutation of Mr. Saxelby's suppositions and asked that Mr. Saxelby provided support for his stated caveats. While the county indicated that it would seek this information from Mr. Saxelby despite additional follow-up by the club, the information was not produced. Accordingly, it is the club's position that the recommendation by the county planning to revoke the permit variance was based on incomplete technical analysis and thus failed to fairly consider the club's proposed mitigation measures for a reflected noise issue. Again, this leaves the club in an untenable position. The zoning administrator's ruling does not take into consideration that the shot screen work was not performed by the club, and the ruling fails to address all dynamics of the parties involved. Those parties include the club, scholastic shooting teams, uprange residents, and downrange residents. Simply put, the ruling only addresses one side of the equation. In other words, it only addresses uprange residents' concerns while ignoring the situation between the club, the scholastic teams, and downrange residents. At no fault of the club, it now finds itself in an untenable position from a ruling by the zoning administrator who refused to allow the club an opportunity to implement mitigation measures to potentially rectify the noise issues for uprange residents. It should be noted that those mitigation measures would also continue to address downrange residents' concerns. The history and background of this current situation involving all concerned parties is illustrative of the conundrum the club now finds itself in because of the zoning county administration's ruling. The club's attempt to accommodate the increasingly popular scholastic shooting programs, example CYSSA, apparently caused concerns and complaints by some downrange residents such as the Carlisles and the Donahues. Mr. Carlisle apparently expressed these complaints to the county, which recommended that he reach out to the club to seek some kind of resolution or compromise. As a result of the county's advice, Mr. Carlisle approached the club, commenced dialogue regarding potential resolution to noise concerns. Though legal avenues were also expressed, Mr. Carlisle negotiated the potential mitigation measures that involved the installation of a shot screen that would not only mitigate the noise for downrange residents, but also address environmental issues by making reclamation of spent shot much more effective. As part of the negotiated mitigation measures, Mr. Carlisle invested approximately $600,000, and the club spent $100,000 of its own monies. Mr. Carlisle handled all the permitting requirements with the county, which also included retaining the company that designed and installed the shot screen and an independent acoustics consultant to review the shot screen for noise mitigation. Unfortunately, the shot screen did not perform as it was designed, and the reflected noise from the shot screen caused concern for uprange residents. It is believed that the problem is a function of numerous factors, including the county's demand to move the shot screen closer to the shooters, 75 yards, rather than the optimal requirement, 90 to 110 yards, due to the location of a seasonal drainage area, and pulled in the sides panels on each wing of the screen in order to protect additional residents. The county has claimed that the company designed and installed the shot screen changed the type of material or fabric that was used. However, all indications to the club was that the rubber matting was always the fabric intended to use for the shot screen, but perhaps the color had changed. Accordingly, the club found itself the target of many Upper residents' complaints and demands to remove the shot screen. The club and Mr. Carlisle immediately began meeting with the county to attempt to mitigate the backscatter noise and address the Upper residents' concerns. However, despite numerous meetings and proposed plans to mitigate the issue, the club was unable to obtain approval from the county to implement the mitigation measures on the shot screen. As a result, the Upper residents' persistent complaints, the county noticed a permit variance revocation hearing with the zoning administrator, who in turn issued a ruling to revoke the variance for the shot screen permit. The revocation now requires the club to remove the shot screen within 90 days, or the county would pursue a nuisance abatement proceedings against the club, which may shut it down until the shot screen is removed. As a small nonprofit organization, the club may not be able to completely afford the cost of the removal and disposal of such a large structure, which is estimated to cost approximately $125,000. Thus, the club now appeals the zoning administrator's ruling to the County Board of Supervisors. Accordingly, the club is asking the Board of Supervisors to provide equitable relief from the zoning administrator's ruling and overturn it in a manner that provides the club an opportunity to mitigate the noise issue for Upper residents while also continuing to address downrange residents' concerns. Without such an equitable decision, allowing the club the opportunity to seek a global resolution for all parties involved, the zoning administrator's one-sided resolution equation places the club in a serious situation by no fault of its own. It is certain that if the county requires the club to remove the shot screen without attempting to mitigate the noise issue, the club and the county will return to the same situation regarding the downrange residents' concerns. In fact, it is also relatively certain that legal actions may be likely taken against the club to resolve the downrange residents' concerns. In closing, the club has always been an outstanding organization in the community since 1949 and has consistently maintained an excellent relationship with its neighbors. The club is proud to be part of our community and does exceptional community outreach in many ways, including but not limited to our local scholastic shooting teams, law enforcement training, and firearms safety programs. In order to continue being a good neighbor that cares for its relationship with its neighbors, and in order to reach a global resolution that benefits all parties, not just one, the club is willing to limit shooting operations to address concerns raised by its neighbors. To that end, we have already stopped shooting on Wednesdays and Fridays in order to work with its neighbors. It is the club's belief that with this considerable concession, in conjunction with the county's assistance to work with the club, allowing it to seek to mitigate the noise concerns, will achieve the desired global resolution benefiting all parties. The county will retain necessary jurisdiction over the shot screen variance permit to monitor and determine whether or not the mitigation measures, which include a shot screen design modifications and shooting operation reductions, achieve that desired goal of global resolution. For all the previously mentioned issues, concerns, and rationale, the club respectfully requests the Board of Supervisors reverse the zoning administrator's decision and provide the club an opportunity to reach an agreement with Mr. Carlisle to resolve the problem now, rather than only solving a one-sided equation while leaving the other side unresolved and continuing on. As previously mentioned, the club and Mr. Carlisle have been working on an agreement regarding shooting operations, which take into consideration the eventual appeal ruling by the Board of Supervisors. And to that end, we would ask the Board of Supervisors grant the continuance of these proceedings so that we can include the uprange neighbors in the negotiations in order to achieve a true global resolution. These negotiations would allow us to demonstrate how the mitigation measures would resolve the backscatter noise. Lastly, if a continuance is granted, we would ask that, if possible, Supervisor Gustafson can oversee the negotiations and facilitate the meetings between the parties in order to seek a complete and total resolution. Thank you for your time and consideration. If any questions, I can answer them now, or Mr. Carlisle can come up.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Supervisor Holmes, you have a question?
Thanks, Mr. Rich. That was a good presentation. You mentioned that the county made the recommendation, this was early on, for Mr. Carlisle to approach the Trap Club for discussion of his concerns.
Yes.
Who from the county made that recommendation?
That I'm not certain of. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor?
Supervisor Montgomery.
Okay, so this didn't come from the planning department or any other?
Not to my understanding, no.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Gustafson?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and I'm not volunteering yet, so. I began attending Board of Supervisors meetings last March and began to hear of the noise impacts. And as I listened to those, I met several times with the club and asked, would you please reduce your hours? You understand, everybody has agreed the noise is worse than we thought. I appreciate now you're talking about this and reducing hours, but in the meantime, 11 months have gone by and there wasn't a change. So that's a concern I have. And do you have any response to that?
No, ma'am, not at this time. I know that we are, serious about what we're doing. I wasn't involved in all those decisions at the time, but we are looking and will always continue to look at options and possibilities to reduce shooting hours and try to incorporate everybody's needs.
All right, no current other questions from board right now. I think you were going to turn it over to Mr. Carlisle
Yes, ma'am.
for a brief presentation.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Carlisle, not sure how long you have, about 10 minutes would be
About 10
great.
minutes.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And I'll try not to rehash too awfully much here. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and the board, for this time. I'm going to be speaking in two roles here. The first role really is going to be as a downrange resident, in which I have expressed a lot of concerns and tried to work something out with the club. And then briefly, secondly, in support of the mitigation measures that we're doing. And I can answer any technical questions that may be related to these proposed mitigation measures. First of all, my wife and I have been residents here for some 16 years, since 2004. The club, of course, has been around since 1949, and it states that residents were aware of the club when they bought property. I would say this is partly true. Historically, the club had about 100 to 150 members, and it shot 2.5 days a week. And then around, as we know, 2013, the club increased the shooting from the historical 2.5 days a week by adding student trap teams, which ramped up to 5 or 6 teams over the next few years. This resulted in a steady increase in shooters from maybe 150 to something like 350 or 400 shooters over the last few years, and the shooting increased from 2.5 days a week to 7 days a week. So residents like us who bought property in 2004 and based our decision on shooting 2.5 days a week and only one evening saw an increase to 7 days a week, and that, depending on the student season, ranged in some years from January through July, and some years from October all the way through the following July. And that additional shooting went right through the dinner hour. The students would start shooting after school. They'd start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They'd shoot to 7 or 8 o'clock at night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, every evening through the dinner hour. Further, and sellers who wanted to sell properties then listed them in the fall, and they typically failed to disclose that the club would shoot 7 days a week, December through July. I have references here from a number of downrange residents, Diane and Tom Tharp, Ray and Katie Bennett, Mickey and Roxanne Donahue, Nancy Jo Rixey, all of whom bought property without that disclosure and bought it in the fall and then discovered that there was shooting 7 days a week starting in January. Further, one real estate agent, Mr. Jerry Sellers, told me that he tried to show a house listed for sale on Lawrenson Road, and as soon as the prospective buyer heard the club, he refused to even consider the property, and this property was taken off the market unsold. So historically, when confronted about the shooting, the club has told all complainers, we are grandfathered in, and we can shoot 24/7 if we want to. Multiple residents have filed complaints with planning and code enforcement. In the last 3 years, somewhere between 8 and 20 complaints have been filed. It appears that there are 6 distinct complaints, and some folks file as many as 8 or 10 complaints, just from one complainer. These are all downrange residents. about the noise from the intensification of the shooting. There were also 2 complaints filed about the noise reflected from the shot screen. So people are quite upset, understandably upset, about the reflected noise as well. So twice as many downrange residents filed complaints about the intensification of the shooting as uprange residents complained about the screen, not to discount the reflection complaints. Planning has completely ignored all these complaints from downrange residents. I couldn't find a single downrange resident that ever heard back from planning or code enforcement about restricting the shooting hours, just completely ignored. And it only acted to revoke the variance for the shot screen when uprange residents organized a large group to complain. My next point is that communities and standards develop and change over the years. In 1850, we used to dump arsenic and mercury into our creeks and rivers. In 1950, when the club started, we insulated our homes with asbestos and we painted our walls with lead paint. By 2000, many communities passed noise ordinances, recognizing the adverse effect on noise on the quality of life. In particular, percussive noise is much worse than white noise, as percussive noise, such as a gunshot, triggers the startle reflex, which causes a fight or flight epinephrine dump and causes anxiety and depression in about half the population. It is a health hazard. At the revocation hearing, after I mentioned this effect, multiple additional speakers testified that this was their reaction to the gunshots, and several also mentioned their dogs had this kind of reaction. So recognizing the negative impact of loud noise on community life, in 2004, Placer County passed a noise ordinance, which limits noise received at a receiver's property to 70 decibels. Prior to putting up the shot screen, the noise at Lawrenson Road was 114 decibels. That is 150 times louder in sound pressure level than the noise ordinance. Even a mile downrange at Kramer Road, the noise was 94 decibels, which is 16 times louder than the sound pressure limit of the noise ordinance. Frankly, I believe the Trap Club is the single loudest noise source in Placer County. Please picture your own home in your mind. Imagine someone pulls up a truck with a giant speaker on the back and plays recordings of shotgun blasts 4 to 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, directed at your front door. You think you might call the sheriff to object. What if the sheriff says they have every right to do that? The Trap Club is not grandfathered in for this increase in shooting from 2.5 days a week to 7 days a week. While Placer County Ordinance 5459B protects shooting ranges that were in existence before 2006, it clearly states that no such use shall be enlarged or increased without first obtaining a minor use permit. The club has never obtained a use permit. As I mentioned earlier, planning and code enforcement have been ignoring downrange residents' complaints about the club for years. I know. I filed one in May 2017. I received an acknowledgement letter, but no one from code enforcement or planning ever contacted me about my complaint. I know many other people complained and were also ignored. So in 2017, as been described, I sat down with the previous supervisor of District 5, Jennifer Montgomery, her staff, and several folks from planning, including George Rosasco and Alexander Fish. Jennifer listened and suggested that before resorting to legal remedies, I go talk with the Trap Club. So I did this, and I met with Chris Slane, and Chris said, well, you know, the students really like to shoot, and we're really not going to agree to reduce the shooting hours. He did say that he was aware of this gentleman, Dave Tanner, who was an architect and had been designing these shot screens. And so, as has been described, I met with Dave. We went and we visited a few shot screens, and we designed this shot screen here for the club. And so that was a cooperative project between the club and some concerned residents, and the club was kind enough to consider that. With regard to reflections, one of the concerns was, what about reflections? We tilted the screen at 3 degrees, as has been described, and we used Placer County's recommended sound engineer, Mr. Paul Bollard, to analyze whether reflections would be a problem. And he wrote a 12-page report, and he said that reflections would behave like light does. They would hit the screen and bounce off at a reflected angle that would be complementary to the incident angle, and the reflections would be 60 feet above any downrange residence. That was Placer County sound engineer analysis. So the net effect of all of this was that he was incorrect. Sound does not behave like light. It reflects in a more diffuse manner, and that's resulted in an increase in reflected noise for the uprange residents. There were some additional slides here. Can we bring those other slides up? Did you load those, Jay? I still have a couple more minutes. Can we bring up those other slides? These were the ones that... They didn't have them. Okay. All right. Well, I distributed to the board a slide package. I think each of you may have received that.
The board does have that on the dais.
Okay. Let me just grab.
Is it- Right.
This slide package was titled Carlisle Public Comment.
Right, thank you. We all have a copy up here. Sorry, we don't have any slides for you.
Okay, very good. So I won't spend a great deal of additional time on this, but there are a couple of key points that I do want to make. The first key point is that the shotgun blasts are highly directional, and that is that in data that we took prior to putting up the shot screen, the sound blasts at Lawrenson Road were 30 times louder, a factor of 30, than the reflected noise back at the nearest uprange house. So it really, the downrange folks are really affected much more than the uprange folks. And by only considering the complaints of the uprange folks and not considering the much heavier impact of these shotgun blasts on the downrange folks, the planning is not considering these two equally. There's not equally under the law. The second point here is that after we put up the sound screen, the reflected noise increased by a factor of 2. So there's definitely, it's louder and people can hear it. And people that were fairly far away, for example, a half a mile or a mile away, could suddenly hear the Trap Club where they couldn't hear it before, and that's generated a lot of complaints. I could never hear it, now I can hear it. Now, if we do the mitigation that we are proposing, and if we turn to this screen, this slide here, if we do this mitigation, it will direct 80% or over 80% of the energy straight up in the air. It won't be directed back at the shooters and the uprange residents anymore. Sorry?
I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, sorry?
Copies were available for the public as well in the board's
So
office.
what's happening in this case, we're going to...
Mr. Carlisle, we need to have you speak towards us so we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Excuse me. So that this will be directed up in the air. And I submitted a video, and we showed this at the revocation hearing, of a trap club in Italy where they have exactly that situation. They have a backdrop. It's sloped at about 45 or 50 degrees. And in the video, you can hear that there are not any reflections. You can't hear any reflections at all. And so that, we can argue about sound consultants, but this is a real video. It's real video proof that sloping the screen is effective in directing the acoustic energy up in the air. Okay. Now, the other point is that if we put in the mitigation and we reduce the reflected energy to less than the backscatter, then all the folks who have been hearing noise that they didn't hear before will no longer hear that noise. Because the reason they're hearing this noise that they didn't hear before from the Trap Club is because the reflections were louder than the backscatter. And if we make the reflections quieter than the backscatter, then they won't hear that noise anymore. So all those folks that are over half a mile away that suddenly started complaining won't hear it. And the folks that are within, that used to hear the Trap Club, the reflections will be quieter than the backscatter. Okay, now, just to wrap up here, as Jay Rich has mentioned, the club and the downrange residents would like to request a continuance of this hearing in order to allow time to hold a meeting with the uprange residents. We'd like ideally to have this hosted by Supervisor Gustafson if she can legally do so and is amenable to doing that. We'd like to discuss the reflection mitigation details in detail and show the video and answer questions and really have a meeting outside of this rather formal setting, and also have the Trap Club there and see if we can't get agreement among the various parties, the downrange residents, the uprange residents, the Trap Club, not only on the screen mitigation plan, but so that we can try it, but also on the shooting hours. And the club, I've been putting pressure on the club to reduce the shooting hours. They've reduced them some. They've said maybe they'll reduce them some more, and that they'll stop shooting at 8 o'clock at night and maybe stop shooting at 5 o'clock at night. And so there's a lot of discussion going on back and forth there. And I think that rather than me trying to negotiate with those folks, I think we should really try to engage the uprange residents as well. And ideally have a member of the Board of Supervisors involved in those discussions so the board can be aware of those discussions. I don't think this needs to go on forever. I would hope we could, have a continuance of just a few weeks, that we could invite the uprange folks and the downrange folks to get together, have a 2 or 3 hour discussion about all of this, and if we can reach consensus, we can make that recommendation to the board, both for the mitigation, if that's how it comes out, or for tearing down the screen, if that's how it comes out, and on the shooting hours in either case. So I'd like to give this one last shot at finding some kind of agreement that addresses the needs of the downrange residents who are seeing 30 times, or historically 30 times the noise of the uprange residents, but recognizing that the uprange residents' concerns need to be addressed as well. If we can't do that, and if the board just rejects this appeal, then I think we're going to be back to where we were 3 years ago, which is screen has to come down, noise is going to go way up for all the downrange residents, and then we're going to be in the position of where we were 3 years ago of considering filing some sort of a lawsuit to get the county to actually enforce the law, enforce the code that says use permits required for any increase in shooting. So that kind of concludes my presentation. We're trying to do the right thing here. I'd like to try to engage both sides and see if we can't reach a resolution, and would appreciate the board's support for that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. All right, Supervisor Holmes, you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Just one question. Can you be certain that the modifications that you suggest are going to satisfy both the uprange and downrange residents?
That's why I would like to have this a meeting between the uprange and the downrange residents. For me to make that assertion here without the uprange residents really having a chance to express their concerns and get their questions answered in some details, is a little presumptuous. I believe that it will address the reflections. What Mr. Dobbs suggested earlier, of just lowering the screen to 36 feet won't do anything for reflection. They're just going to keep bouncing right back. People are going to be upset. Sloping the screen at 50 degrees has been demonstrated by the video at the Italian Club to fix the reflection problem. So I believe not only is there a detailed analysis done by Mike Carr, and Mike Carr spent weeks doing this analysis, took a lot of data, and his analysis shows that this will address the reflection problem, but we also have the video. So I'd like to share that with the Upper Range residents and see if we can convince them. If we can't convince them, then the board's going to have to make their decision.
So it suggests it might work, but you can't be certain.
Well, we have a video that shows that it works, at least in Italy.
In Italy. Last time I checked, we're not in Italy. Thank you.
All right, no other questions from board members. So this is the time we're going to open up to public comment. I'm going to have the clerk read the procedures for public comment.
As most of you know, there was a sign-up table out front. You were each given a card if you wish to speak. That card has a number on it. We'll be calling each group and asking you to line up on the wall behind me. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and then they will go sit down, and we'll call the next group when we get close to the end of each one. So for right now, if everyone from group 1 will come up and line up against this wall.
And if you still want to speak and did not get a card, you can let whom know to make sure you get a card. Is there somebody
If you
still
go
out
out
front?
to the front,
Okay,
we still
so
have
if you
staff
go up front,
available
if
to
you
give
have
you a card.
don't have a public comment card, you can do that. So we'll get this first group lined up, and then we'll take public comment. All right, sir, it looks like you are up. If everyone would please give your name for the record, and we'll ask, we've got a number of folks who want to speak, so keep your comments brief if possible. Thank you.
I'll be real quick.
Good morning.
My name is Howard Coons, Koons. I live on Lawrenson, and my driveway abuts the Trap Shoot Club. The representative from the Trap Shoot Club spoke earlier. He said they were reducing the sound in days of fire. That is absolutely not true. They have increased the days, they've increased the hours. It is outrageous. Something's got to be controlled in terms of the amount of noise they produce daily. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, sir.
Morning. My wife and I have lived what is south of the club for almost 33 years now. And until the sound wall went in, we could hear it, but it wasn't objectionable. And I do a lot of gardening. I'm outside all the time, and I consider myself kind of an expert on the noise in the area. So it's been a pleasant place to live until the last year. The fact that the club has increased its frequency and its hours of operation so dramatically recently, in light of all the trouble we have, makes me a little skeptical about their motivations. It's really tough to enjoy being outside, especially in the evenings now. And we can walk out to Joger, and we can actually look at the wall, and it looks just like a huge version of the Hollywood Bowl, except we're not being treated to concerts, obviously. One other observation that I have, when I was in college in the 70s, Caltrans did a lot of work on sound walls, and they found that the most effective way to control noise was to reflect it. And they built a lot of sound walls, almost always both sides, so that it would reflect back and eventually up. But they always found that when they put one in, they had to put one opposing it. Otherwise, somebody was going to receive a much greatly increased amount of noise. So I'm a little skeptical of what any acoustic engineer that designed the first one would have to say at this point, because it just exactly looks like an amphitheater aimed right at all of us to the south when you look at it.
Thank you. And did we get your name for the record? I don't know if we did.
Mark Sigworth.
Thank you, sir.
Hey Jay, my name is Philip Tascone. I live on South Creek Haven, south of the gun club. I'm here to testify that the ATC shooting wall has changed and degraded what used to be a great part of Auburn. Beautiful rural properties, great local views, wineries, a great place to retire. Now, because of this wall, almost every day is ruined because of the way the sound is projected across the surrounding rolling hills and ridge tops. If a property is on a hill or a ridge of any kind, that property is experiencing shooting that sounds like explosions because of the daily unpredictable atmospheric conditions. On or about January 9th this year, I could hear the shots when I was working on Mount Vernon Road near the Seamus Ranch, which is almost to the Auburn Main Post Office, almost to this building. I live less than a mile south of the ATC on Creekhaven Road, and due to the changes in atmospheric conditions on days like January the 9th, the shots sound like explosions at my home. This explosive impact can't be minimized. From Lawrenson Road, the sound travels miles to Bell Road, Coyote Ridge, Miracle Drive, Deer Ridge, the Richardson Development, Bald Hill, and all the way to Baxter Grade. I know this because we drive around collecting data at these locations. Lately, more and more citizens are coming forward to let you know that this noise is destroying the peace of this entire region. My wife and I are the primary caregivers for my 85-year-old mother, and all of us are being subjected to actual damage to our hearing. Everyone in my home is over the age of 60, and I'm here to tell you that this is elder abuse. It hurts our ears, and the shock waves hurt our minds and bodies. Our animals are confused. We can't even consider getting ourselves another dog. This is a health and safety issue, a quality of life issue, a trespass issue. Our finances are being strained, and our property values will go down. Our retirement and our futures are being ruined. This wall has stolen our lives from us. We want and need our peaceful habitation on our own property. The wall has now robbed us of a year of our life. After putting up with this for a full year, everyone in this area is now shell-shocked and probably suffering from PTSD. We, the residents of North Auburn, want our peaceful way of life back. The shooting needs to cease until the wall comes down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Can I submit this for the record?
Certainly. Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Jack Sanchez. I live at near Mount Vernon Road in Joger, and I can't believe over 6 miles away I hear this noise. I was born in Ophir 80 years ago, and this area is absolute paradise. This is one of the flaws in Auburn Ophir paradise, and it must be dealt with. This negates our way of life. It negates our businesses. I was just notified by the Brookcrest Homeowners Association, where I own a number of homes. They are up in arms on Richardson Drive because of the impact of this noise. A 9 o'clock meeting on Monday morning, no working person. They're all young people who rent my houses, and they can't be here, so I'm here to speak for them. They are disquieted, and they expect the county to do something about that disquiet. I have other properties on Blue Ridge and other places that are in, I guess it's what you call the down range area in North Auburn. But this is a major, major problem. So I'm speaking for all my tenants and the Homeowners Association at Auburn Brookcrest. This is one of the greatest boards, I've said this any number of times, of supervisors in the state of California. Robert Frost says, something there is that doesn't love a wall. And you've heard all the allusions to what it is that does not love a wall. So please do something to return the Vale of Comfort to the paradise that we live in North Auburn. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Doug Hansen. I bought a home on Joger in 2018. No noise, and now obviously, like everybody else, there's no point in harping on that. It's obviously been a mistake the way the sound wall was built, and that has to be rectified. But I'd like to hear more time spent on solutions rather than we're all going to say the same thing. It's obviously an annoyance, and I'm going to look at every one of you and say that the common good or the greater good has to make you make a decision. And there are a lot of folks who are affected in more ways than just the sound. And you've heard them all, the property values and everything. But also, one thing, the hours that were posted on the website last week I looked said Tuesday and Saturday and Sunday. Well, that's not what's happening. There's a lot more shooting going on than that. But you folks have to make a decision based on the greater good, and that's all I want to say. But it is obviously very annoying. My landscape project now is on hold for a new backyard. It's unacceptable. I can hear it from the inside of my house. So anyway, I know you're going to get tired of all this complaining, but hopefully that drives you to a decision that's quick and doesn't take forever because of red tape. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Supervisors. I have lived at my current residence for 40 years and never once complained about the Trap Club until now. I live on Pickle Barrel Road, which is about 1 mile from the club and uprange from the club, south of the club. I couldn't hear it at all inside my house or on my backyard deck. Since the sound wall was erected, the noise is many times louder. I can hear it everywhere, even inside my house when the windows are closed. I can still hear it when I have music playing or I'm watching TV. It is now quite irritating. I do not wish to see the Trap Club shut down, but the noise amplified by the sound wall must be terminated. And I'd like to add to my prepared statement something about these mitigation strategies that Mr. Carlisle suggests. I'm very skeptical of them, and angling the wall at 50 degrees, having the sound bounce off and go up into space. Mr. Carlisle has also said that sound doesn't behave like light. If it was a light wave, yeah, maybe it would do that. But Mr. Carlisle has also acknowledged that when sound hits a reflective surface, it's diffused and dispersed. It's still going to go everywhere, even with a 50-degree angled wall, in my opinion. The initial design and construction and permitting process for this wall were significantly flawed on a number of counts. The wall was designed to benefit one person at the expense of hundreds of other homeowners living in the area. The height of the wall is as tall as a 7th-story building and was designed primarily to block sound from reaching a single person's hilltop home. The documentation submitted to the Planning Commission during the permitting process and for the variance request was misleading and was intended to circumvent the requirement of an environmental impact report. No EIR was ever completed. Material used to construct the wall is different than the material stated in the permit request. Hundreds of homeowners who are now impacted were never notified of the plan to build a sound wall and were never given the opportunity to voice their concerns or objections to such a wall. The Planning Commission has realized what a mistake the wall was and has rightfully revoked the variance for such a high wall. I do not understand why the Trap Club does not acknowledge the problems created by the wall and is appealing the revocation decision. If they desire to be a good neighbor with surrounding homeowners, they should be voluntarily taking steps to completely remove the wall. Sound levels should be returned to their historic norms. Just got a couple of more paragraphs if you'll permit.
Certainly. Just wrap it up when you can.
The Trap Club has radically altered the parameters of their operation and business model. They are now generating sound levels that are many times greater than the historic levels. I believe the new business model is not protected by existing state law that would normally protect shooting ranges and airports against noise complaints. The change of operation by Trap Club will impact property values of many homeowners and could generate future litigation if not dealt with. The Board of Supervisors now has the opportunity and the responsibility to begin correction of this problem. I am hoping the board will deny the appeal. I would also hope that removal of the wall could begin immediately, at least the top half. We have been waiting long enough for resolution of this issue. In my opinion, the wall should be removed entirely and as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Did we get your name for the record, sir?
Dennis Morgan.
Dennis Morgan. Thank you, Mr.
And I have
Morgan.
a copy that I could submit to the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patty Scott, and I live at 11520 Lawrenson Road. I'm probably the closest neighbor to the Trap Club. My life has changed considerably. All I can say is it sounds like professional fireworks, like 4th of July, all the time in my yard. What's really affected me the most, though, is I've had this horse now I've had for 15 years. I ride him all over the place. My neighbors, they can tell you I've ridden this horse all over the place forever. I cannot ride him at all now when they're shooting. This horse just about dumped me. My girlfriend's horse almost dumped her. The horse is, I mean, he's a 20-year-old horse, and he's calm as anything, and now he's just ballistic. You know, it's really changing his personality. These pops are going off continually. You know, I have off on the weekends, so that's when I ride. I've also lost 2 roommates, which I really count on in order to pay my mortgage because of the sounds. My property values, my realtor said, you know, probably $200,000 less than what it would be. You know, plus I think it's affecting my health because I'm just stressed out all the time over it, you know, and especially my horse. It's just the dogs, they're affected too. We can't hear or have a conversation in the yard when this is going on. And I've lived there now since 1988, and the original Trap Club never fazed me, never fazed my horses. It's like a whole different club there now. It's not the same. I just don't know why they don't go back to the way they were, because nobody complained before. You know, 50-some years they've been there and nobody's complained. So it's right in my backyard. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
If all the speakers from Group 2 could line up, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Roland Holland. I live at 11520
Oh,
Lawrence.
you know what? Hold on a second as they get up and let them move because I didn't even hear your name.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, please.
My name is Roland Holland. I live at 11520. I'm with Patty here. It seems like that someone didn't do due diligence when they bought their property to build a home. So then it affects everybody else in the community. Instead of the Trap Club coming to the community and asking everybody in the neighborhood who's the closest, hey, he's threatened to sue us. What should we do? We need to stand up for ourselves. Well, it comes down to, if you want a wall, put it around your own house. Don't put it in front of everybody else's. You know, don't block the view of the beautiful scenery there was. The Trap Club looked beautiful before this wall went up. Like she said, 30 years, over 30 years she's been there. No problems. Everybody in the community knew when they moved in to the area the Trap Club was there. He knew the Trap Club was there. Why is there such a problem now? Why is there a wall being built with the wrong material, excessive height? It should be red tag. When a red tag happens on a home, you don't get to move into it. So why are they still using the Trap Club? We don't want the Trap Club to go. We want the wall to go, period. Let's get it back to what it was, the original site that it was, not what it is now. First off, a person who wants to force their weight and their money on people is just bullying, okay? That comes down to they're benefiting who? Themselves, solely, nobody else. He doesn't care if the Trap Club's there or gone. He just doesn't want to hear the sound, period. We don't mind hearing the sound. One pop, not a pop, and then the second one's twice as loud as the first pop. I used to be a competition shooter. I know exactly what happens when a trap club gets shut down, because mine did in Brentwood, California. It's now a golf course. I guarantee you, if it continues with this, the trap club will end up losing it, and it will get shut down, unfortunately, for everybody in the community. It's been a wonderful thing all these years. Why are we going to destroy it now because of one individual who didn't do their work to find out what he was moving into? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Amen. So my name is Stephen Stern. I live on Rand Road, probably 4 miles from the Trap Club. We retired here almost 2 years ago, never heard a sound until last year. I'm wondering why I'm paying $8,000 a year in property taxes when my house is not worth the $750,000 we paid for it. I realized after the last meeting that the Trap Club thought we wanted to shut them down. That's not the case at all. I'm a lifelong shooter. We lived forever in the middle of nowhere. I had my own range. My kids shot. I shot all the time. I love guns. I studied martial arts all my life. I want my law enforcement to be the best by practicing and shooting. I practice my martial arts. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I am prepared. It's the helping of the youth. That's a wonderful thing. I have taught kids in law enforcement for 40 years. It's not about anti-guns or the gun club. It's about this sound. And if I could just play what I hear from my porch over this is what I hear from 4 miles away. It's been probably 1,200 hours. That's on my deck over the creek. This is going on for hours and hours and hours. I can't take it. I'm done. All done. I don't know what to do. I'm a peaceful man, but this is ridiculous. In my house, I hear it over the TV, the laughter of my grandkids, because we live on a family compound. I spend all my days outside, either doing my art or gardening or with my grandkids. We don't want to go outside. My dog is a mess. She's not the same. Please help. Thank you very much. And I have a statement to read. I was told I could do for Wendy Butcher.
Yes, sir.
She's very ill, and
Give you the her time.
So I want to thank today's hearing officers, our supervisor, and their staff for conducting the variance revocation process. The neighbors are here today in full support of staying the decision of removing the non-compliant portion of the sound wall. I would like to say how saddened I am that this has affected so many families over the past year. What was once a peaceful rural community is now subject to daily and nightly disturbance by the 100-foot wall. The wall is visible for miles and amplifies the sound all the way to Meadow Vista and across 49. This goes beyond causing hearing loss, panicking pets and livestock, disturbance of the peace, visual blight day and night, and loss of property value. I'm especially disturbed that the Auburn Trap Club, with their direction from their representative, Mr. Carlisle, has manipulated the narrative and accused the affected community of wanting the club closed so they could convince the county to allow the major modifications to the 7-story wall, most likely creating more visual blight and unexpected effects on sound. They are using the youth teams like a pawn to reason to keep the wall open. Even they practiced and competed before the wall was built. This has never been about the neighbors wanting the Auburn Trap Club closed. This community has always supported the club in shooting sports. However, it is no longer easy to be supportive. Their unsympathetic actions over the last year have not shown concern for the health and well-being of the community that has been a good friend since 1949. They have shown more preference to Mr. Carlisle by allowing him to intimidate them into building the wall, appealing the recent decision, and wanting to modify this one. This one kind of monster has proven that the only way to reduce the noise in the historic levels is completely remove the wall. The Auburn Traffic Club can in fact remove the wall. They own it. We're told it was funded by a grant that was given to the Placer County Community Foundation. The individual who wanted this wall does not own the club or even represent their interests and is taking extreme measures to lower the noise at his own home. I'm never going to do this. Sorry.
Well, that's all
proximity
right.
affecting hundreds of others in the community. We, the residents, agree that the county has repeatedly misled and that the wall is a failure. Humans make mistakes. We ask that we all make mistakes, and I hope that we make it right and learn from them. We ask the Trap Club simply to be accountable and that the wall is a failure and a detriment to most of us. Just want to go back to the way it was. It's too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir.
And I can give you this. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jim Lance. I live off of Rockview Court near Bell Road. I think we're at least 2 miles away from the Trap Club. So affecting neighbors within a half a mile is certainly understating the effect, but you've heard that. I have all the empathy for Mr. Carlisle and the downrange people, because if what I'm hearing is right, that the noise level is, or activity has increased, it's a problem, certainly a problem. But I think the sound wall is a different issue. It's created a different problem for everybody else. So I think that that's what you're having to address here. The sound wall clearly was not the solution for the downstream, downrange neighbors, considering it's just redirected the problem. I would hope that if you don't revoke the permit, that you would at least take some action to have the Trap Club cease activity other than testing new solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scary. Hi, my name is Marilyn Beaumont. I live at 4960 Creek Haven Road. We are perfectly meeting corners with the Trap Club. We've lived there for 26 years. Never could not hear it inside. And I could garden. My garden looks right at the wall now. I could garden without, it was like a little pop. Now it's unbearable to go outside, literally, when the shooting is happening. The other night, I was sitting watching TV and I sent, thank you, Mr. Dobbs, for all you've done. I just took a quick little video with my phone, had the TV on and the shooting. It was an equivalent sound. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
My name is Catherine Gray. My property is 11536 Lawrenson Avenue, or Road, rather. Part of my property butts right up against the Trap Club. I just want to say that we don't want the Trap Club gone. We want the wall gone. I don't know why models weren't set up to see how the sound would react with the shooting instead of putting that wall up. I would think that there would be some kind of a compromise between the Trap Club, maybe dialing back their shooting hours. When I bought my property in '97, it was disclosed that, yes, we were buying a property that butted up to the property of a Trap Club, and that they would be shooting 3 days a week. And yes, the shooting has increased, but it was tolerable before the wall went up. Now, the studies that have been done, you can't just go out and take sound readings. One point, you have to consider atmospheric conditions and everything else. It has to be over a term of 30 days or something. All I'm saying is we want the wall down. It's like living in a war zone. for those of us who live south of that wall. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Marlene Coons, Koons, and I live at 11530 Lawrenson Road, very, very near the trap chute. I'm not going to talk about the sight, the light, and the sound. We all know the problem. My concern here today is the comment that the gentlemen have made that they want more time. Excuse me, as soon as that wall went up, we made our concerns public and privately. They've had over a year to experiment as much as they wanted. They had over a year to try all kinds of things. And in addition to that, I would think, since there are so many community members upset about the wall, that the trap chute just might consider not getting in our face with it. And it has been since we complained that the noise has gotten worse, the hours are longer, the days are longer. They haven't done anything to make us believe they're willing to compromise.
Thank you.
My name is Cheryl Burkhardt. I'm a neighbor of Mr. Holmes and a neighbor of Mr. Stein that was here. And I will first read what I emailed you, and then I'd like to make a couple comments. While working in our garden last May, my husband and I heard for the first time in 26 years gunfire. It continued all day. A friend came by while we were in the house and said, "What is that noise?" We didn't know. Almost a year later, this nightmare in North Auburn continues to cause grave hardship to us and many others in the area. While you have been enjoying barbecues, gardening, and normal home life, we have had our lives turned upside down. Once the gunfire begins, it is relentless noise we hold up in our house with fans, white noise machines, and an indoor water fountain. All that white noise is nerve-wracking. Yet it is still not loud enough to completely negate the gunfire. It is absolutely a violation of our well-being. There is no humane reason that we who live almost 4 miles away should have to suffer this. I have visited my representatives. I have attended each meeting, yet this nightmare persists. We are cast down and broken in spirit after 26 years in North Auburn. The only reason we hear the reverberating gunfire is because of the wall that was built. It must be taken down. In the meantime, please immediately place some courteous restrictions to the hours that the gunfire goes off. We have endured this for almost a year. And I would like to add 2 things. The comment was made that the Trap Club does not have money to take the wall down, and yet they say they will spend how much money to fix the wall. I don't understand that. The other thing is, I would assert that each person here who hears the gunfire, who did not hear the gunfire before the wall, are the experts. And we are the ones who analyze the noise each and every day. And the fact that the gun range has limited their hours on, Wednesday and Friday? What the heck are we supposed to do on Saturdays and Sundays? I have grandchildren. It is our family home. We can't meet there anymore. We are undone. Please do something. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board of Supervisors. Thank you once again for the opportunity to share my experience related to the subject of the Auburn Trap Shooting Club shot screen, as we all know, commonly referred to as the wall. My name is Dana Smith. I live off of Bell Road in North Auburn. We first heard the sound of gunshots early last year, and since that time, it seems like even since the December hearing, the sound is occurring almost on a daily basis and louder. We did not hear this incessant level of noise prior to the construction of the massive wall. Like so many others, we chose our home in Auburn because of the proximity to the canyon and the surrounding woodland habitat. We sought peace, quiet, and a better quality of life. When we purchased our home years ago, the seller disclosed that because the Auburn Municipal Airport was nearby, we would occasionally hear small aircraft flying overhead. We decided that we could live with that type of noise. We were not prepared for living with the sound of gunfire on a daily basis. In fact, we will be required to disclose the sounds coming from the Auburn Trap Club when we sell our home. This unforeseen nuisance will have a negative impact on the value of our property. I respectfully request that the Placer County Board of Supervisors affirm the Placer County Zoning Administrator's January 2nd, 2020 decision to revoke the variance approval. Furthermore, given the significant disruption that the surrounding residents in the community have been and are currently forced to endure as a result of this particular structure, the wall should rightfully be removed in its entirety. Thank you for your time and your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you. And as she's coming up, do we have a group 3 of comments? Okay, so why doesn't group 3 come on up? And ma'am, if you would go ahead.
Hello, thank you for being here this morning. I don't have a lot to say. My name is Cindy Roska. My husband and I, we live at 11814 Lawrenson Road. We share the east side fence with the Trap Club. So on the map, the little road that says private, that's our driveway. So I just had a few concerns about comments made earlier. One is about trying to get the two groups together. I think I could speak for all that that's probably not an option, so I don't think that should be considered. I think everybody's at their wits' end. My other concern would be about agreeing to issue the extra time to do the tilt and the sound. Things need to be considered. I don't know in Italy if they have rolling foothills and mountains that contribute to the sound being blocked in. So that was two of my main concerns. And then as I came home from work last Thursday, now I'm on the south side of the wall, actually parallel. Our house is parallel to the wall. But I come in from the north side. And my concern is that the individual, Mr. Carlisle, all his readings and sounds and his concerns come from Lawrenson Road and how loud the sound is on Lawrenson Road. And my concern is nobody on Lawrenson Road had a concern. Why is he so concerned about Lawrenson Road? I took a sound reading when I got home from work on Thursday from this is the north side of the wall. And I just wanted to show you that it doesn't seem like it decreases the sound on Lawrenson Road. I don't know how that's quiet. My second sound is from my front porch, which is parallel. Sounds quieter. And I'm on my front porch on the south side of the wall. So it's disheartening, and I just want to reiterate the common good for everyone in the whole county and in the area, and our property values and property taxes and all the normal stuff. We don't need to talk about the sound and the height and color. It's all been done numerous times. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Gary Davis. I live on Coyle Road, and my house stands right behind the Trap Club. And if you sit in our living room, you see the green wall. And when the lights are on or the sun hits the screen, you got a big, massive green wall, or you got a big, massive light like a mirror hitting it, and it reflects on our house. And the next thing that really bothers me is that I love being outside. I came from the Bay Area, moved up here 14 years ago, and I just enjoy it so much. I got a pond out there. I take my granddaughter out there. I have goats and dogs, and they're all screwed up. And I've said it before. My granddaughter's come up to me, and she said, "Papa, I don't like being outside no more. It's too noisy." Now, when you have an 8-year-old come up to you, it means everything to you. Something is wrong. And to have one person, Mr. Carlisle, start all this problem for everybody, it's not just his side. Behind him is twice as bad now. I mean, we're paying for all the problems that makes him happier. Like that one guy said, put the wall in front of his house. Something has to be done. I thank you guys for all listening. I know it's been a long day. But the only thing I think has to be done, either tear the damn wall down or shut the club down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Pamela Massey, and I live at 11500 Lawrenson Road. I'm directly behind the Trap Club. Marilyn's my neighbor, Patty's my neighbor. We're all neighbors. We're all very good friends. So on Sunday, I bought the movie Frozen 2 for my son and I to sit down and watch it. So my house is a long one-story house. Our bedroom's in the way, way back. And as I put the movie on, I can't hear the movie because I can only hear the gunshots that are reverberating through my house. And so my son says to me, Mommy, just ignore it. Just ignore it. It'll be okay. And I'm tired of ignoring it. I've been there for a year, and I have ignored it. I have put up with it, but it is taxing on my nerves. It's taxing on my family. It's taxing on my life. We love the Trap Club. We love what they represent. We love what they do for the community. So this isn't against them. This is a meeting about the revocation of the wall, not about the Trap Club. The hours and stuff like that, that's something that can be dealt with afterwards. This is strictly about the thing that has disrupted so many people's lives. The best solution is to take the wall down. If you want to mitigate the problems for the residents that are downrange, there are shot screens that are out there that do that. This shot screen was constructed out of material that was never even tested for it. They did something that helped one particular person's property, and it was as high as it is for his particular property. If we're concerned about the downrange residents, that's okay. They can do things, and they can do shot screens that are going to help those people. But this shot screen is designed to help one particular person. So please keep that in mind. We're all at our wits' end. We all want the darn wall down. We want the Trap Club to stay, so please don't hurt them. Just take care of the problem that was created and that brought all of us here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
My name's Tony Dewey. I live at 4042 Pheasant Knoll Court, which is exactly 1 mile south of the wall. The first comment I want to make is about this constant use of the term uprange and downrange. I'm not sure that these are technical terms that have a meaning here, and I would like instead for people to start talking about north of the club and south of the club. I think this makes sense to everybody. I don't think the terms uprange and downrange mean anything, and in fact I think people are getting confused by them. That's my first point. The second point is regarding the noise level at my house. It is certainly not twice as loud as it used to be. It is many times more loud than, especially with the atmospheric conditions that we've had in the past couple of months. The sound has been intolerable. And just as an aside, I happened to talk to one of my neighbors who was not aware of the wall. They had been living with the sound, totally unaware of what was going on. This person is experienced with guns, knows shotguns, and told me quite frankly, no, they can't be shooting shotguns out there. That's much too loud. They must be shooting large caliber guns to make that kind of noise. It is that loud, and it's obviously got to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kathleen Clifford. I live about 2 miles south of the gun range. I have raised 6 kids along with my husband in the same location for 17 years. We've never had a problem until the wall was built. We love the gun range. We take our kids there. We've gone there for years. Like everybody else said, that's not the problem. The problem is the wall, and I hope you guys vote to take it down. Thanks.
Thank you. And as this person comes up, are there other folks for public comment? And if if there are, you can line up behind the last person there. Go ahead, ma'am.
Elaine Smith, 11863 Jurger Road. And we purchased our home on Jurger Road in 1974. But I was also raised in the community. The Trap Club has been a part of this community forever. And I get the complaints of all of the people that have moved in. And it always happens when people want what they want for themselves. And this is just an ongoing thing that's going to continue. I wasn't wild about Highway 49 becoming 5 lanes. I wasn't wild about the extension of the airport that allowed jets to come into the airport. You deal with certain stuff that happens in communities. But if this shuts down one more thing that has always been there for our young people to have something to do that gives them a sense of responsibility and makes them belong to a community, that's not what this should be about. And yes, it obviously bothers a few people that have moved into the area. But it has always been there. And if you don't check out your area when you're purchasing a home to know what is in your community, you've made your first mistake with purchasing that property. And I just hope this doesn't put the Trap Club out of business, or, because the noise has gotten more, I don't object to it personally. My husband has PTSD, and we deal with that. It is not affecting his life. I am outside all the time, and it just, in my location, has not altered my life at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kathy Reed. I live at 11654 Sherwood Way. I'm a 1.5 miles south of the Trap Club. I've lived in Placer County since 1974, and I've been in this home since 1993. I was not advised the Trap Club was there and hadn't researched it, but I did hear it when I was outside, and it didn't bother me. I could understand the sound of it, and it was fine. But it's been the last year when I can hear it over the sound of my television inside my home, and the shooting occurs. I suffer from PTSD, I suffer from severe depression and anxiety, and I've had to up my medication strictly because of the gun shooting. It's not appropriate. I don't want the Trap Club to go anywhere. They're a good neighbor, or they could be a good neighbor, and I think they need to be more understanding of what's going on in the neighborhood. I would like them to curtail their evening shooting. I think maybe when the sound wall comes down, it will be better and we can all tolerate it. But for right now, the evening shooting is totally intolerable. Thank you.
Thank you.
My big folder. Hi, my name is Nancy Jo Rixey, and I'm here to read a statement from Mickey Donahue. He was unable to attend. He lives on Lawrence and down from the Trap Club. I, Mickey Donahue, do not support the revoking of the shot screen permit for the Auburn Trap Club. The shot screen does provide some decimal level reduction for those neighbors who are downrange from the club. However, even with a reduction in noise levels coming from the Auburn Trap Club still exceed safe and acceptable noise levels permitted by Placer County and the state of California. In addition to the unsafe noise levels the Trap Club is creating, the club has admitted to increasing their use of the club under oath at a past hearing regarding the shot screen, as well as during public comment and in meetings with the club, has acknowledged that they are increased shooting operation hours of use and have brought in many surrounding trap clubs to shoot in order to stay in business. This acknowledgement from the club is a mission of insufficiency of use of their permits, event hours of operation and attendance. With this county with this, the county should be forced to investigate and make the club cease operation until the county can make a responsible decision on how to proceed with the shot screen as well as operation in general at the club. I urge county supervisors and staff to enforce rules and regulations that many other clubs and businesses are forced to follow to ensure the safety of neighbors in the surrounding community of the club, as well as maintain the positive standard of quality of life in Auburn. And I would like to make my statement if I could.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll make mine short. It's very long, but I'll make it short. I'm here to request you, the elected officials and senior staff, to use your discretionary authority to require ATC to go back to their historic hours and to use as a 501c7 social club until the county can sort out the shot screen issues, but more importantly, ATC's use permit. I'm requesting during this period not allowing ATC to use their social club traps as a commercial business. I'd like to quote the exemption that I was given and told that the reason that they can do what they want. Exemption 10 from the noise ordinance. Sound sources associated with existing legal non-conforming and or existing permitted commercial, industrial, or nonprofit operations which do not significantly change in existing on-site activities or result in a change in the number of days or daily hours of operation. ATC has definitely done that, and they've said it out loud to you. Also, the noise ordinance declaration. The people of Placer County have a right to and should be ensured an environment free from unnecessary offenses or excessive sound and vibration that may jeopardize their health or welfare or safety or degrade the quality of life. This is your declaration. You all signed it. I know that there are a lot of people in the Auburn area that are social members of ATC and community influencers, but do the right thing for the people and protect their health, welfare, and quality of life. Sorry, I get emotional. I'm done.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment during public comment? It's your last opportunity. Well, you've already had your opportunity. So we're going to bring it back to the board. And let's see, any factual corrections that need to be made by staff of anything that you heard from the appellant?
Not at this time.
All right.
Correct.
Then I'm going to bring it back to our board, and Supervisor Wygant, do you have any questions or comments?
I have some questions at this point, so I took notes, and if you'll bear with me. I think I heard in testimony that the material by one person was thought to be compliant with what was permitted, and we talked about that. We've met, obviously, just so the audience knows that we all have researched just more than just this hearing today, but could you talk about develop that a little bit for me, the differences in the perspective as it relates to the material? And
yes, I believe there is a picture in the packet that might be helpful to explain this, but they provided a sample of material along with the application, and that's what the modeling was based off of. This was it's I think a 16th inch thick conveyor belt type material, but it was very rubberized. Or eighth inch?
It was the 8th inch.
So it was a very soft material. And, somewhere in the, between the approval and the construction, the material was changed.
No, that's not correct either. Same material.
At the hearing, Mr. Carlisle indicated that it was a harder material, and as such, is contributing to the noise reflection.
Okay, thanks. Next question has to do with noise, which I know is tricky. I'm certainly not an expert, but I've sat through Bill Graham Amphitheater Presents issue and other hunting clubs, and I represent the Valley Floor where there are hunting clubs and actually industrial type farm noises, and I've had constituents who moved into the area recently complaining about chickens crowing in the morning because they're from some downtown place that doesn't have chickens, I guess. And we have a right to farm ordinance, which helps protect all of that, and I understand the difference between the ambient daytime noise and how different it's supposed to be, and the thresholds that we use in our industrial area. But so with that in mind, I had not thought before today, but there's this, again, downrange versus uprange notion that's been thrown out today. And so I hunt birds, so I'm familiar with shotguns. Never really thought of a shotgun being louder one direction or the other from looking down the barrel as compared to being behind it. Do you have any comment about that? Do we know anything about that?
The data suggests that it is louder
down the
direction that the barrel is pointing.
Much louder?
Yes, from what I understand.
Okay, thanks. Then also, again, I'm still on noise, sound. I know that the inversion layer can hugely affect how the sound travels and to what extent. I had one telephone conversation with a constituent out in the area. I have no reason to doubt that it wasn't valid, but I could hear over the phone the shooting, and the repercussion, if you will, from the sound bouncing off the wall was significantly louder than the original shot in the first place. Is that consistent with complaints you've gotten and follow-up information?
Yes, Supervisor Wygant, the ricochet is
Correct.
at a higher frequency. It is louder.
And so similarly with changes in wind and inversion layers, I just thinking so I guess predisposition just show, I think we need to change current circumstances, and we need to do that pretty quickly. I'm searching for a best resolution to that, which is what I'm pondering. So if we allowed this wall to shoot the sound into the air, it seems to me like it could cause different and maybe even worse repercussions depending on atmospheric conditions, wind, those kinds of things. Is that consistent with some of the research that we've done?
Yes, sir. That's consistent with our noise expert, that there are a number of factors, temperature, all these things, inversions, and that will that creates a real uncertainty of where these sound waves will travel.
Okay, thanks. Is the facility lighted?
Yes, there are downrange, again, pointing to the north in the direction that they shoot. There are floodlights.
I didn't realize. Okay, thanks. So I'm assuming, just based on testimony, but I'm hoping we have some data that we're collecting as relates to the complaints, quantity, intensity before and after this wall was completed. Do we have data on that, and could you comment on that?
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I know Tim Wegner, if he's back here, from our building department who oversees code compliance, they had a list of numbers, but I think it was true. We had about a dozen or so complaints. Those were, originally when those came, the first one came back in May from Mr. Carlisle. At that time, it was deemed to be unfounded because of the legal non-conforming use of this facility.
Okay, thanks. So the next question is, this is technically, this might be a Karen question, but pre-existing non-conforming use, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, we have a lot of those. My predisposition also is that, in that I am a gun guy, I don't want to see the facility have to be shut down. Looking for some kind of better relationship with the community as the community changes is something that I think makes a lot of sense. I've never thought before of a pre-existing non-conditioning use incrementally, and what I mean by that is, are there thresholds, or obviously there's more people moving into the area, lots get split, higher densities, even though it's farm, rural residential. But I always thought more of a pre-existing non-conforming use as being more black and white as compared to if you have more people. What I've seen is that there actually is more shooting, even though in California at least there's less of of a fondness towards guns, I guess. But even with that, I know that the hunting intensity out on the valley floor is greater than it ever was when I was a kid growing up here. And I'm assuming that the use out at the gun club there's a higher demand for it. I'm aware of the high schools and the shooting clubs that have emerged, which I think is a good thing. But is there some kind of legal threshold where all of a sudden a certain amount of increased use triggers some kind of permitting requirement even for a non-conforming pre-existing condition?
Yes.
Could you help me with
that? Would you like more of an answer than
Yes.
that? Yes. You know, the last speaker mentioned the noise ordinance and the exemption on the noise ordinance and pointed out, correctly so, that legal non-conforming uses are exempt of the noise ordinance. What's important to realize is legal non-conforming use means you are grandfathered in for the use that was in effect at the time another ordinance was adopted that changed something. So we have, in fact, even under our chapter 1760-120 under nonconforming, and I'm going to read this into the record because I think it pertains to this discussion. Commercial shooting ranges that were in use during the 12 months prior to January 1st, 2006 may be continued, transferred, or sold, provided that no such use shall be enlarged or increased with first obtaining approval of a minor use permit. And naturally, a minor use permit for a proposed increase of use would be subject to public hearings and CEQA review. So in other words, to answer your question, and I think this is where the difficulty comes into being is with the use, unlike, for example, non-conforming building, where you can pretty much tell when a building increases. A non-conforming use, you have to establish by the evidence, what was that use? How often was the trap club open and shooting as of January 1st, 2006? What that use is what they are grandfathered under and protected for. They are not protected, and this notion that has been lodged that they can shoot 24/7, as far as I could tell, is a myth. You only are protected with what you had at that time.
So I'm assuming, though, that would you agree that in this case, that would not be a bright, sharp line, but one that was more interpretable amongst the five of us?
No, not necessarily. I think what it amounts to is actually having somebody investigate, having code enforcement, if the board so chooses, having code enforcement actually do an investigation as to what were the hours of operation, what were the days of operation in January of 2006. That establishes your baseline. Then you investigate, has that use in fact increased? Now, if the board has that information in hand, feels that it does, then certainly you can move with that. But right now, in this hearing, what we're talking about is the variance for the wall. So we have to separate out the non-conforming use and the issue regarding that with what's in front of the board today.
Okay, so last question is, I think people are pretty smart. I've heard a lot today that most people moved in. I think most of the testimony by far was that they moved into the area knowing that the club was there. In fact, a lot of people testified that they wanted them to stay. Some even consider it as an amenity. So they moved in knowing what the sound was like before the wall. And we've heard about how that's changed since the wall. But we've been told it looks pretty clear, but I want to, we today only have the authority to reduce the size of the wall by about half, correct? We don't have, and we don't have any design review guidelines over the look of it's one of the most ugly rural residential walls I've personally ever seen, in my opinion. But we have no perspective over design review guidelines, I guess.
Correct. In the farm zone districts, it's just a ministerial permit, anything up to 36 feet, and there is no design combining district.
To the extent even that it may cause injury to people, glare, those kinds of things.
I mean, whatever is subject to the ministerial permit and you know, as long as it meets, you know, building codes and et cetera.
Thanks. Those are my questions.
Supervisor Gustafson, did you want to respond?
Actually, I wanted to respond to Supervisor Wygant's last question. This is correct. You can only reduce the wall if the appeal is not granted and the zoning administrator's decision is upheld. That means the wall has to go down to the 36 or 38 feet. I forgot which it is. 36 feet. Now, there is a procedure under the code. It's under 1762-170. It's the same code that was used in the original zoning administrator's hearing to revoke the variance. That procedure can be used for the building permit which allowed the wall to go up. The procedures are the same. It is an evidentiary procedure. It takes time to go through it to determine whether the building permit was in fact obtained due to misrepresentations. Again, evidentiary, not part of this hearing, but is something that the board can consider in a direction to staff.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Gustafson.
I wanted to follow up on Karen, some additional questions for County Council. So what options do we have with the requested actions? So if we wanted to modify or change these at all, do we have that discretion?
You do. Your discretion here is you can either follow what staff has recommended, which is to deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's revocation. You could grant the appeal and decide to overturn the zoning administrator's decision. You could look to modify the permit. In other words, you'd be keeping the variance permit intact, but you would be modifying the conditions of approval. That would actually be, depending on where you're going with it, it could be a partial grant of the appeal, partial denial. We'd have to know what exactly you were looking for if you were trying to modify anything. But those are your options today in terms of formal action.
Okay. I'm not sure. This is a tough situation, and yeah.
I should say, you know, there was a request for a continuance on the table.
Right.
That's certainly also at your discretion whether you want to continue this.
You know, my preference would, at this point, without some agreements of change of operation, I can't agree to a continuance. People have been subjected to this for a long time, and I think we've had substantial evidence of that. At the same time, Supervisor Holmes and I were in several meetings in which we talked about modifications to the wall, which I don't think any of us are convinced can make it better. But at the same time, you know, do we give people the opportunity to try that in the window of the 90 days? You know, and that was one of my thoughts. You know, if they want to try to modify it and run testing, and again, it would have to be significant testing, that maybe is a possibility to see. I don't think anybody entered into this situation trying to do harm to others. And I think that is one of the misrepresentations I've heard that I'd like to say. I don't think Mr. Carlisle or the Trap Club wanted to make the situation worse for anyone. But they were concerned, or Mr. Carlisle and others were concerned about the hours, and I've heard that from others about the increase in hours, and that probably is my larger concern. And what I asked you about months ago was, when you're grandfathered in, anything goes, or are there limits? And so I want to see the Trap Club continue. I want to see a reduction in the impacts to the neighbors, and I think without any agreement here today, it's hard for me to agree to continue and give another additional 2 weeks or whatever period of time. If those 2 weeks could be deducted from the 90 days, then there'd be no harm to those folks. And that was one of my thoughts, is if we want to give direction that the wall will come down 90 days from now, but we can have 2 weeks to see if there's any other modifications that we can require. But again, I'm not clear, you know, how we would craft that into conditions. So I look to you, Karen, on that.
Well, in that, what you could consider then is basically following staff's recommendation, but revising the time frame in which the wall would come down to include some period of time to test for changing the wall. So we can work on that if that's where the board wants to go.
Or the continuance, I think, that was suggested was to work out the hours and some other compromises that were being asked. Let me give it some thought while we hear from other supervisors, see if I can come up with something. Supervisor Holmes?
I know this has been very disruptive to a lot of people that live out there. It's been disruptive to me ever since March of 2018 when we went to the the North Auburn Municipal Advisory Council, and Beverly Robertson, my life has been kind of disrupted because we're fielding all kinds of phone calls, emails, meetings about this issue. I think the only way to resolve this, save people a lot of time and a lot of money, if you could take the wall down and the trap club goes back to its original hours, that would solve everything. But unfortunately, that's not before us today. It may be, but again, I would caution both Mr. Carlisle and the trap club that that would be your best solution.
I would agree to that.
In the meantime, I would recommend that we deny the appeal and uphold the zoning administrator's revocation.
Other Supervisor Gustafson?
I was just going to second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion about this action, which would be to uphold the zoning administrator's recommendation? Is that correct? That's what I heard by a motion and a second. Other discussion? All right, so.
Let's take it separately, the requests.
So we'll take it separately, which is the first request. Did you read the first?
Deny the appeal filed by Auburn Trap Shooting Club.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. And those opposed? Motion carries. The second motion.
Find the Auburn Trap Shooting Club variance revocation categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to the provisions of CEQA guidelines section 15301, 15303, 15061B4, and 15321.
A motion by Holmes. Second by Gustafson. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Uphold the zoning administrator's decision to revoke approval of the height variance.
Holmes and then Gustafson. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, before we move forward, we've taken some action. I think the question I have is, do we have additional direction for staff about any other item in regards to this? I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is there is noise both north and south. I'll use those terms based on what the gentleman said. But there's been noise both north and south of the gun club. I think that this is an existing use that's been there for quite a while. People utilize the club. People enjoy being out there. The question is, to how much, and what are those hours should they be? We've been told that they were grandfathered in and it's 24/7, but that was clearly not the intent back in 1949, which is shooting it at all hours of the day and night. But I do think we could request staff to look at some other options to continue to address this issue. Supervisor Gustafson.
I agree with that. I am concerned that these folks have to live with this 90 more days till the wall comes down, and I'm also concerned that if the club chooses to leave 36 feet up, that it's going to still create impacts on folks, and that's been my concern all along. So I would want staff to research what was going on in 2006 best we can. I've had a lot of evidence given to me, but I don't know that it's legal evidence and can withstand that the The use has grown. I would implore all sides to try to work together in the meantime to understand the impacts that this has been making for well over 11 months in people's lives, at least as long as I've been attending these and up here in these meetings. And it's profound. And I believe that the testimony we received articulates that.
Anybody else? I have concerns about two things. One, that 36-foot won't change the reverberation. The materials, from what I understand, are not what was originally what we understood. So I have a concern about that, because if the wall stays the way it is, we still have issues. And then I have concerns about the 90 days. So I don't know if we can reduce the amount of time for 90 days of that, but at the same time, do we look at, like Supervisor Gustafson said, do we look at revocation of the building permit so that we can actually get this, honestly, this wall taken down and go back to hours that would be reasonable for the community? I certainly understand that there are young people who want to shoot. I think that's terrific. But it's clear that whether you're north or south of this enterprise, it's affected people because the number of hours of shooting have increased a good amount.
So let's break that down. If you want to go with a shorter amount of time than the 90 days, you just took action on upholding the zoning administrator's decision. So you would have to rescind that motion and propose a different motion that reduces that amount of time. So that could be done. The other issue regarding the building permit, you can certainly, if the board so wishes, to direct staff to look into whether there is a basis and grounds to proceed with the revocation of the building permit.
I see a couple of heads nodding, so the question is, what are you nodding to?
Well, I guess I'm agreeing to the latter, which is that we simultaneously look into the building permit and hopefully have that resolved, bring back to us. The research staff has done, so hopefully it mirrors the 90-day timeline. Is that doable? Let's make it doable.
Sounds doable, but I would also defer to our building department once again, because it is revocation of a building permit.
Okay, well, then if you're making are you making a motion?
Yes, that is a motion.
I'll second that motion. Is there any other discussion?
Would you please repeat the motion?
No. That we simultaneously to the revocation, that during the 90 days for the wall to come down, that we investigate the building permit and see if we can make findings to revoke it. Thank you.
Any other clarification? So I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion carries. So we'll direct staff to work within that next 90 days, please.
And I just want to be clear, that also includes the previous discussion we had where we didn't have a motion directing staff to look at the hours, historical hours.
Yeah, right. All right, that concludes the business of this hearing. Thank you very much. County Council, yes. So our next item is we are going to move to closed session, and I'll have County Council read that out.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to consider one item under public employment. District Attorney, continue review of applications as stated on the supplemental special agenda.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here at the hearing. We appreciate your input.
Done. The board met in closed session to consider one item under public employment. The district attorney, the board heard a report on the continuing review of applications. The board provided direction. This concludes the report out of closed session.
All right, and with that, we will adjourn until our next meeting, which is tomorrow morning in Kings Beach. We're adjourned. Thank you.